So what's going on YouTube? My name is Mehul and welcome back to another video where we're going to start with a brand new course, a brand new web series using Next.js. So Next.js is an awesome piece of technology. If you have never used Next.js but you are a React developer, you're missing on so much. So in this whole web series, in this whole course, we're going to be looking at Next.js, what it is, how it works, and how you can work with it in a professional manner, in a manner in which you can develop very high quality production ready applications. I have built codedam.com completely on Next.js. So yeah, I mean, whenever you're using codedam.com, it's built using Next.js technology. Now, one thing I want to make sure here is that I'll be posting this course on YouTube, but this course is going to be available on Codedam as well as a standalone course, and as well as, you know, a part of the Next.js mastery learning path. So Next.js mastery learning path is this learning path right here you can see on Codedam site. So we're going to be following all these things, right? So I would have this content on YouTube as well, but the content on YouTube would be published late. So if you're somebody who's watching this video, please go ahead and register on codedam.com. It's free. You can register for free. And yeah, you can just stick along on YouTube meanwhile the course is getting completed. Or you can register on the Codedam website, start watching the course there. The learning path for Next.js is going to be free, at least for the development part. I'm assuming that you are interested in learning about Next.js in depth. So we're going to be covering a lot of things. You can see we have a completely dedicated Next.js learning path on codedam.com. So yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to bring value, as much value as I could, using both platforms, YouTube and Codedam. So it would mean a lot to me if you could just go ahead, sign up on the website, because that would let me know that you are interested in the further courses, in the future courses as well. So that would be all for this little quick, kickstart to the course. From the next tutorial onwards, we're going to be starting off with Next.js and the actual formal official course. So that's all for this video. See you then in the next one. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the very first video for our Next.js course. And in this course, in this whole web series, we're going to be working a lot with Next.js. We'll be developing a lot of projects on the way. We'll be learning the ins and out of the framework. So if you're watching this course on Codedam, you are going to be updated with the latest Next.js frameworks as they roll out. Currently, it's 9.5. And yeah, if you're watching this on codedam.com, and if there's any significant change, the contents would be added again to the framework. If not, to the learning path. If not, then please go ahead and sign up on codedam.com for watching the same content. All right, with that being said, we're going to be exploring a lot, just like I said, in this whole web series, but starting off with some prerequisites, some requirements I would say you must have for this Next.js course. Obviously, the first thing is that, you know, if you are a React developer, please only then follow along with the course. This course is not for people who are extremely new to React or who are extremely new to HTML or CSS. And you probably know this if you have been following the Next.js roadmap on Codedam, which you can see right here with us. So we, on the Next.js roadmap, we actually start with the basic HTML and CSS skills. Then we build some JavaScript skills, then React fundamentals, and then we come to Next.js. So this is very important. You must have basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React fundamentals with you before you start working with Next.js, because for the most part, Next.js is going to contain a lot of React code, a lot of best practices of React code, a lot of React. So this is one thing I want to just put out there. If you do not have access to, if you do not have knowledge for the HTML, CSS, and React, you can always go to the Next.js mastery learning path. You can find all the links and get started with those topics first. So yep, that would be all for the learning path, at least. And for this whole course, we're going to be building, just like I said, a lot of things along the way. So I'm pretty excited to start this course. I hope that you are excited as well. So let's get into it, and we're going to be learning a lot of things in this whole web series. Everyone, welcome back, and in this video let's just go ahead and go over what Next.js really is and why it is needed. So Next.js is a wrapper, to speak as of in the simplest terms. I would say Next.js is a wrapper around React framework, which enables your React code to pre-render, which enables your React code to run on the server. What do I mean by that? Well, you see, when you're working with a React website, which is just the client-side JavaScript code, what happens, the process is that firstly, your client will download the code from the server, then that JavaScript code would be executed by the browser, and then you're gonna see the actual output on the screen, the actual HTML elements and divs and all that. But if you take a look at sites which are built with Next.js, what you're gonna see is that if you go to view source, you could pretty much see all the content within the HTML document itself, right? For example, I can just search this text pre-rendering right here, and this is the h3 tag which we are seeing right now, right? This is statically generated and server-side rendered React applications, and this is what we are seeing. So you see that in this case, in the case of Next.js, the server is actually sending you the HTML itself. But in case of React applications, the server sends you JavaScript bundles, which is then executed by the browsers, and then the output is displayed to the user. Now, this is one of the many benefits Next.js brings in, but this is the most important one, right? Everything else, zero configuration, fully extensible, static exporting, let's just leave that because that is also sort of pre-rendering only. CSS and JS ready for production, all these are actually possible with just React as well. But with Next.js, with these two features, basically the pre-rendering one, because this is just a side effect of that, but because of pre-rendering, it opens a lot of doors for performance, for SEO, for caching, stuff like that, and it is awesome. The only thing which Next.js truly does, which makes all the difference, is this thing, that is server-side rendering of React code on the server, so that your server actually sends HTML instead of JavaScript bundles on your screen. So this is what Next.js is about in a nutshell, and yeah, that's why I wanted you to have a basic understanding of React, because in Next we'll be following certain practices set by the framework. We'll be following certain patterns, certain design patterns, but for the most part, because we are writing React code itself, the underlying principles remain same. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you understood the difference between Next and React and why it is needed. We'll come to performance benefits, SEO, stuff like that later on in the series, because that's technically not related to the coding part directly. It's more about the user experience and the marketing side of the things, but that is very important as well. So anyway, that's all for this video. If you liked it, let's just move on to the next one really quick. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video in which we'll be starting off by setting our Next.js project. So first things first, what we're going to do is go on your systems and make sure that you have Node and NPM installed. And I'm assuming that you are a React developer, you have some sort of experience with React, so you should have that by default. Once you do have that, just go ahead and write npx create next app, and just go ahead and write the name of your project. In our case, it would be hello next. You could have any name here you want. And the next thing is I'm going to pass in a flag called --use npm. Now the reason I'm passing this flag is because I have both yarn and npm on my systems. So I want to use npm. That is why I'm using this thing. And for the matter of fact, what this npx is, how this all is working, if you want to dive deep into this, we have a dedicated course for npm mastery as well on Codedam. Hopefully you're watching this on codedam.com, so you can go ahead and check that out as well if you want to learn more about how npx and everything works. So once you have that, just go ahead and hit enter, and it should be up and ready in a couple of minutes. Now mind you that we would be using TypeScript in this whole course, because TypeScript is a production ready technology. It enables you to write high quality code while suppressing a lot of errors which might just slip in. So you get all those benefits of static type checking and auto completion and jumping in code here and there and refactoring and all that stuff. So it's a pretty decent deal. So once we have done that, once the project is initialized, let's just go ahead inside the folder hello next and let's see what's going on here. So if we take a look inside the files section, okay, I think we did not really open that correctly. If we take a look inside the files section, all right, so you can see right here that we have some JS files and not a lot of activity going on, right? We have some regular package.json files and everything, and I'm gonna get to the whole directory structure later on in the next video. But for now, just stick along with me and let's just go ahead and convert these into TypeScript. So it's as easy as doing this with Next.js, right? Just make sure your extension is .tsx for the files which actually use JSX. And you could go ahead and keep it .ts for the files which are, just pure TypeScript or just pure JavaScript, right? Once you do this, it should be enough. Now, if you're coming from a TypeScript background, you're gonna immediately notice that we do not have a tsconfig.json here. But the thing is that Next.js can automatically take care of that. How awesome is that? So I'm just gonna go ahead and create a file called tsconfig.json. I'm gonna keep it empty. This would be handled by Next.js. We don't have to really mess around with, initially at least. And what I'm going to do is we can see that we just have 3 dependencies at the moment: Next, React, and React DOM. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a couple of more, which would enable us the type support and all the nice features of TypeScript. So I'm going to install TypeScript right here. I'm going to install the node types, which is going to enable us to write server-side code. And I'm going to install the React types, which is going to give us autocomplete on the client-side code for React. And I'm going to save this as save dev, because these are dependencies which we don't really want on production, because on the production Next.js would automatically be, compiled down to JavaScript and all that good stuff. So once you do that, we are basically done to see our hello world. Now you might see some of these errors, but don't worry about them. These are all false positives. They would be all rectified once we fill up this tsconfig. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and write npm run dev, which in turn is going to go to package.json and see that we have a dev script which is going to run next dev. And next dev is magic. It is going to take care of the server initialization, compiling your TypeScript, auto reloading, hot reloading of code, fast refresh, all that stuff, all that good stuff out of the box. It's just magic. So we go ahead and run this, and you can see that it says to me that we detected TypeScript in your project and created a tsconfig.json file for you. So that's very nice of Next.js, right? And you can see that we get a nice little populated tsconfig.json file with us, plus a next.env.d.ts file, which is a typed file, but we don't really need to worry a lot about this. But for the most part, you can see that our code base is purely in TypeScript. We don't have any JavaScript yet, but we can still go ahead and visit this URL, that is localhost 3000, and we're gonna see that we get a nice little page greeting us, welcome to Next.js. We can in fact go ahead to index.tsx and change this from Next.js to Next.ts, because why the hell not? And you can see without even reloading, with the help of fast refresh, we get immediate update to our page. So we're going to explore a lot about what these technologies, what sort of architecture Next.js follows, and what's actually happening in the main app itself. But for this video, I think this should be enough to get you started with Next.js. Hopefully you were able to follow along till now. If not, let me know in the discussions below. I'm going to get back to you if you are stuck anywhere. That's all for this one. I'm going to see you very soon in the next video. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and explore our project a little bit, because we haven't really seen what's going on here. So I'm just going to minimize the terminal for you, and I'm going to close these files. Now what we see on our left, that is the file structure, is pretty interesting. Now, the reason it is laid down in the following sense is because Next.js requires a specific file structure, which is not a lot of technologies, which is not what a lot of technologies do outside there. And it's sort of, some people like it, some people don't like it, but this is what it is, at least for now with Next.js. So what's going on? Well, first things first, you see this public folder, right? Whatever you put it in the public folder is going to be directly accessible on your root domain. In our case, you can see we have two files, that is favicon and vercel. So if I go ahead, let me just go ahead and bring this right here. If I go ahead and just go to vercel.svg in my URL, you can see right here I get the vercel because this file was put right here, right? Similarly for favicon, if I go to that URL, you're gonna see we get our favicon right here, if you could just see it in the dark. If I create a file, let's say robots.txt, and if I say hello robots, stuff like that, save that file, go to robots.txt, what you're gonna see is we get the same file. So it's basically a directory which Next.js uses internally to serve off files as it is. Now, if you create an index.js or anything, it would not be processed by Next.js. It would not be executed as a node command by Next.js. It would be served as it is, right? So you have to be careful about this. Whatever you put inside the public directory is directly accessible by anyone, right? As the raw source thing. And a good thing is it does not matter where your contents is as long as it is in public directory. So you can have a bunch of folders, for example, A, B, then you can have c.txt, and you can say hello there. And how it would be accessible is pretty much A, B, c.txt, just like that, right? So it's just going to follow the whole directory path and reach out to that particular file, just like it would work on a file system. So it's pretty neat because, now you have a one-on-one pairing on how you are storing your files and how they are served, right? Most of the frameworks like Express provide that as well with the static express.static middleware, but Next.js provides that out of the box without you writing any code or any configuration. So this is about the public folder in Next.js. There's another interesting folder you can see, pages, which is basically the heart of our application, which is basically our source code would live, right? So we're going to discuss a lot more about pages as we go on, because this is like the central part of the routing system as well. But for the most part, the styles folder is not really required. So you can go ahead and move the styles folder inside public as well. I mean, that would just make your styles accessible through a URL instead of like bundling, but it won't really matter, right? Because your CSS is visible anyway. So you can, or if you want, you can keep the styles in a separate folder, or you can move them inside the pages folder itself, right? So if you do that, what's going to happen is you can delete this styles folder, so to just get rid of a new folder. And right here, instead of importing it like this, now because you have deleted it, just import it like this, right? And inside index.tsx as well, just import the home.css style directly. So if you do that, and if you go ahead and go back on the page, you're gonna see it pretty much looks just like before, right? And yep, that's basically it for the whole structure. So now you more or less have only two folders, pages and public, which are a must to have in a similar way. Well, actually there's one way to have pages as well. So you can create an src folder and then throw in pages inside that. That would also work just like it is working right now, but I'm not really getting into that. So I'm just gonna remove my src folder for now. But the idea is you must have two folders. The first one is public for static assets, and the pages folder for your source code, which is responsible for running the node code and rendering your React code on the page as well. We're going to discuss what this API is later on. It is something special, not really related to the rendering part, but yeah, it is special. So that would be all for this video. I hope you liked it. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. Let's get there. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and explore the pages directory a little bit. Now, we are not really going to explore all the routing part just yet, but pages provide a very powerful yet simple to maintain routing mechanism in Next.js. So what happens with pages is that whatever file Next.js finds ends with .ts, .tsx, .js, .jsx inside the Next.js folder, inside this pages folder, it would create a path of that. Or to speak in the reverse way, whenever you visit something which is like your website.com/mypage, Next.js is going to find mypage.tsx, basically resolve that mypage module inside the pages folder, and it's going to return that component, that React component, to the browser. Enough of talking, let's actually see what I'm saying. There's just one exception to that, and that is the index.tsx. That is, index.tsx is actually available on your root domain and not on /index, right? So if you go to /index, you're gonna get 404. But if you're on your root domain, that is where index.tsx is actually displayed. So what we want to do really is, let me just go ahead and trim this down real quick because we have a lot of code right here, and I'm just gonna actually just get rid of this as well. I'm just gonna say we have h1 hello world right here, and maybe I can just even get rid of that. So we have a very, very small and very simple React component with us here. And if we go on the page, you're gonna see that is exactly what we get. But hold on, if we go ahead and take a look at the view page source, you can actually see hello world written in the HTML itself. Now, this is not something that happens when you're using React, right? Just go ahead and try out an application with create React app, create a component which says hello world and display it, and go to the page source, and you're never gonna find this h1 hello world tag there. So what really happened here is that this page, this component, was actually rendered on the server by Next.js, and it was, crunched into the HTML and returned to the client. This way, this has multiple benefits in terms of SEO and performance, but the most notable benefit you can see is the client now, when the page is loaded, is never waiting for any sort of JavaScript to execute for displaying the content, which increases performance a lot for the client side, right? So yep, that's basically how the pages thing work. So if I go ahead and create a nice page.tsx for myself, and if I just go ahead and copy paste this whole thing, and I say, let's see, this is a super nice page, hit save, and if I go ahead on nice, what was that? Nice page, yeah. Nice page, you can see I get this is a super nice page. Right out of the box, I had to do no routing. I had to, just write nowhere. I have to write, like, if I go to /nice page, this should execute. It is automatically handled by Next.js, and this is some sort of behavior you cannot really change at the moment. So you just have to return a component here. You cannot just return, for example, you cannot just return 2 here, because if you do that, you're gonna see you get an error that the export is not a React component. So the default export from your any file inside this pages folder, just ignore the API folder for now. Any file inside this pages folder, which is a JavaScript file, should export a React component, right? As a default export. And once you do that, it's just going to work just like that, right? You can create as many pages as you want. Nice page 2.tsx. This is also a super nice page, right? And if I go to that, we get this is also a super nice page, all rendered on the server side. This is also, you can also see this, it is available in the source code. And as we create more and more complicated apps, you're gonna realize the importance and benefits of this. Plus the fact that you do not have to customize anything out of the box is just mind-blowing. I mean, this setup works right out of the box. It is TypeScript, React, JSX, Webpack, Babel, everything hidden away from you. Nothing is available, right? So nothing is actually visible, but you can actually get fine control of everything if you want by a file called next.config.js, which we're going to discuss later on. But you know, this is something I love about Next.js. It's simplicity to start, and it can grow as complex as you want when you want it, right? Just like every framework should be. So this is all about pages, introduction to pages. We're going to learn a lot about pages and routing and everything in the routing section. But that's all for this video. I'm going to see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at a special file known as _document.tsx. Now, this is a special file because just like I said, when we create it, it's not going to be available at /document.tsx. But in fact, it is the file which is responsible for all the other things in your document, right? So you see that we wrote this here, this h1 here inside our index.tsx with a div, but we did not really write all this other things, doc type HTML, HTML head, you know, all these scripts and everything. We did not write that. So how did this came as a response? Well, that is precisely what document.tsx allows us to control. But for the most part, we don't really want to mess up. We don't really want to, you know, just mess up with the Next.js things. Document.tsx is used for, you know, injecting our own custom code, injecting our own custom scripts, which we want to be available for the whole application. So what we want to do is just go ahead, inside pages, create a file called as _document.tsx. And first of all, just like I said, we don't want to mess up with Next.js. So what we're going to do is we're going to import certain things. I'm going to import HTML head main and next script. This is, I think, what is required from next/document. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually export a class this time, not a function. Now, bear with me. We're going to export a class, custom document. Why we are doing this instead of a functional component is because we have to extend our original document. And why is that? Because it implements certain methods, certain functionalities which are important for the Next.js to actually use, right? I'm sure there's a way in functional components as well where we can assign this document somewhere in the prototype chain, but the best way, the cleanest way is to just make use of class-based component in a single file. You know, just bite the bullet and use it for once in your whole application, because document.tsx would honestly be a very small file even after you customize it. So what we want, again, with class-based components, we just need to have a single render function, and what we want to return is basically the whole structure, right? So we want head right there. Don't really focus a lot on these tags right now. We're going to be making use of head again somewhere in the next videos, but I don't really want you to get confused with this head right here. So I'm going to keep that blank. We're going to write main, and finally we're going to write the next script as well, right? And actually the main should really go inside the body, which is a regular HTML tag, you know. And let's just restart the server once, because it does not really capture changes for document and app. And if we reload now, you're gonna see nothing really changes. But what we can do now is that we can go ahead and inject something like meta property custom and then value, I don't know, YOLO, something like that, right? And it's I don't know what's the content. Yeah, so here we have it. Refresh. You can see now that we have a meta property custom and content YOLO, right? Now the point is that this is actually available on every page, even on pages which are 404, right? So you can see that we get 404, this page cannot be found, but we still have the YOLO property available for us because this is the absolute base template which is used by Next.js for rendering things, for rendering your page, right? So a bunch of things, use this file as minimal as you can, number one, because this is a root file. This is something which can control your whole application. So you never really want to mess a lot with the global files. So just use this file if you want to probably inject some sort of meta tag which is for verification purposes of your website, or I don't know, just keep the usage of this file to minimal, because for the most part you will be able to customize all the titles, all the head stuff, everything using the actual pages which are available right here. So you can do all that stuff from here as well. So if you want to inject a particular script, you can use that. This would be available then throughout the web pages, throughout the website, some analytic scripts, anything, you can do that. So yeah, I mean, that would be pretty much it for this video. And in the next one, we're going to be exploring another file called as _app.tsx, which is slightly different than this one. And we're going to be understanding how's that. So that's all for this one, and I'm going to see you in the next video. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at app.tsx file in Next.js. So again, just like document.tsx, _app.tsx is also a special file. So I'm going to go ahead and create that, but it's a little bit different than document.tsx and a little bit simple as well to set up. The first reason is obviously because you can go ahead and export a function directly out of it. So what should you write here? Well, let's just go ahead and try to return h1 hello from here, right? And let's just start our server. So we have a server running on port 3000. And if we reload the page, we get hello. Something's not right. If we go ahead on our index.tsx page, what we could see is that actually, let's just go ahead and rename this as app so that we don't really get that warnings. But we see that we have here on the index page. So I am index page and not hello. If I write that, hit save, refresh, but we still get hello. That's strange. If I go ahead and write here, I am page 1, and if I go to /page1, we still get hello. If I go to 404, which is no page, we still get hello. So what's happening? Well, if you could guess, this app.tsx is actually responsible for rendering all of your pages, right? So when you're returning a constant component that is just a single file, what's really happening is that you are executing none of the pages here. So how do we execute pages? Well, Next.js actually passes two things here. The first one is component, and the second one is page props. That is the props passed to the component, to this component by Next.js internally, right? And because this is rendering right now, we can just go ahead and do something like this. So we're gonna write component right here, and I'm gonna just destructure these page props. Now, if we go ahead and take a look, you can see that we get the correct 404 page, as well as if I go to home page, we get I am index page and not hello, and everything is just working fine, right? So basically, this is the endpoint for just updating the pages in a way you want before they are rendered. Now, this is a little bit different than the actual the actual document.tsx page we have. And how is that different? I'm going to show you. Let's just write a very simple console log statement here, which says hello from _app, right? And what I'm going to do is save this and go ahead and refresh the page. So when I refresh this, you can see that in our node console, we got an event, that is a console, which says hello from app, right? That means that this code, this function, was actually executed on the server as well, right? This is the node process. This is executed. We see this console. That means node somehow executed this, right? At the same time, if I go ahead and take a look in the console on the browser, we get hello from app here as well. That means this is executed. This component, this code is actually executed on the client as well, irrespective of I am page one being on the page itself, right? So what you're really seeing here is one of the core fundamental concepts of server-side rendering. That is, the content is available as plain HTML, as well as soon as the JavaScript of that particular page is ready. In our case, the JavaScript, which is of the component, the hooks and event listeners and everything, when they are ready, they are automatically attached to your page, right? So for example, if I have something like, h1 on click alert hello, if I have something like this, now if I go ahead and refresh this page, you can see if I click on this, I get a hello alert. But if I go to the page source, you're gonna see I get no such information inside JavaScript right here, right? It's just a regular h1. So what happens initially is that I'm displayed I am page one, and then when the JavaScript is downloaded and rendered completely, event listeners and everything is attached to it. That is why we get an alert now. If I disable my JavaScript and run this, I'm still gonna see I'm page one, but there would be no interactivity. So what's really happening here is that this code, this function is being executed both on the server, obviously for server-side rendering, and on the client as well. With document.tsx, what's happening is that things really execute just on the server, right? So if I go ahead and write here hello from document.tsx, hit save, you're gonna see that if I go ahead and reload this, we get hello from document.tsx, but we get nothing such message from on our console. Why? Because you can clearly see that document.tsx, although it returns a React component, although agreed that it returns a React component, but it is actually forming the page structure, the overall page structure, right? So that means it is only rendered on the server to create those HTML and head and those custom Next.js scripts and hooking everything in nicely, but it would not execute any JavaScript which is available inside this page right away, right? So if you have component did mount or anything like that, that is not really going to happen, because this is not a component. This is your actual root document which is being rendered through this component file, right? So it's sort of a I don't know, it's sort of a lie as to say that it is a component. It is not a component. It is your actual document which is being rendered. So it won't really make a lot of sense if you have component in mount here and there right here, because they are more suited toward pages, toward individual pages. In our case, it could be index.tsx, where you can have a use effect, which is, once the page is ready, that is, once the page is mounted, you can just say alert hello, right? Or maybe you can just, if you go back to index, you're going to get that hello right here. Or you can just go ahead and, just override that behavior for all the pages right here. So the fundamental difference being between app.tsx and document is that this file is used to create the overall structure, and the code in this file is never executed. The JavaScript code on this file is never executed on the client side. Whatever, the HTML string and everything which we get from this file is put as it is on the source code, and it is not executed as per se on the client side end. So we have some uses for app.tsx, which we're going to discover as we move on. But that was mostly it for this video. And if you like this, we have a lot of things coming up, so just hold on. So that would be all for this video. I'm going to see you pretty soon in the next one. Hi everyone, welcome back to another section. This is our styling section for Next.js. We're going to learn a bit about how we can use CSS and Sass in this section and ways to implement styling with Next.js. So it's going to be interesting. Let's just stick along and see whatever we can do with Next.js in this video. Okay, so we are in our index.tsx page, which is our main page for Next.js. This one right here. Right, and what we want to do is we want to add some styles and effects and everything to the page. So first things first, let's just go ahead and actually remove all the styles from our application. And for the moment, let's just go ahead and see. I'm gonna actually remove our app.tsx file as well, because this one is a special file. We're gonna get to that later on. And there we go. Right, so we just have, let's just go ahead and remove these two pages as well, because, well, they are just trash. So here we are. Now we just have a single page right here, and actually we might need a server restart maybe because of that. And let's see if we are ready to go. And yes, we are. So now we have a very basic hello world with us, no styles, nothing at all. If we just take a look at the source code as well, we have some JavaScript and everything, but when you're going to compile it, you're going to see for production, you're going to see that all this JavaScript is also removed, right? So what we really want to do is try out the JSX, that is styled JSX in Next.js, which means CSS in JS. Now, personally speaking, I don't really like this very much, but I'm gonna still explain to you. But I won't really recommend, as a person who has used React, to go ahead and follow this, because we are already mixing the HTML sort of thing, that is, the JSX part, with the logic in our React components. The least we can do is keep CSS separate in a separate files. And given that Next.js actually has first-class support for that as well, I'm going to recommend not to do that. But anyway, let's just go ahead and start. So I'm going to say this is a simple div for us. And I'm just going to write a real style JSX tag right here, which means that whatever I write inside this now is going to be our CSS for this particular component, right? So what I can say is I can just give it a class name of title, and I can say title has color of red, right? Hit save, and you can see that our title turns red. But this is special because if I go ahead and I'm not really sure if I can just show it to you. Yeah, maybe I can. So let's just go ahead and create a function. Let's say heading, right? And I just return h1 props dot heading right here, and I'm gonna have props right here, and instead of this I'm gonna say heading. Heading is heading, well, a lot of heading right there, but what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and move it right there. Oops, I think I lost my copy paste because of that, but anyway, that wasn't a lot of code anyway. So h1 color red, there we go. So what I'm trying to show you here is that this is still the same, but if I try to use h1 here now, what you're gonna see is that it's black, it's not red, whereas we specifically told the h1 to be red here, right? So how does that work? Well, you see, whenever you're using these style JSX styles, it's going to be component level styles, right? So Next.js is going to make sure that whatever you write inside this is just limited in scope to your component. Does not matter if you're using classes, or does not matter even if you're using, direct style elements. And how does it do that? Well, you can obviously always go ahead and inspect this bad boy with the Chrome inspector, and you can see immediately that actually Next.js is going to add a class to every element inside that particular component, and instead of targeting h1 directly, it's actually targeting h1.jsx and that ID of that particular heading, and then it's saying color red, right? So What happens with this one? Well, obviously you might have guessed it does not have any class at all. So it's just black, just regular. You can go ahead and make this global by saying global right here. And if you do that, and if you refresh, now you're going to see that we have a global h1 as the color, right? So what just Next.js, what it just did is that now it's not really modifying our styles. It's just putting them as it is on the page. Well, this is all about, style JSX for the most part. There could be a bunch of things as well. You can, for the most part, it is used by people who want to have variables with JavaScript inside CSS. So now you can have, just red. So you can say if math.random is greater than 0.5, then you want red. Otherwise, you want blue. And once you do that, whenever you are refreshing it, you're either getting a red heading or a blue heading, depending on how the math.random plays out, right? So that's the idea, that you can go ahead and use JavaScript variables inside CSS. But for the most part, you never really need to do that at all, because CSS support is in itself very good these days. So personally speaking, I won't really recommend anyone to use style JSX, that is, CSS inside JavaScript, unless you want to use that and you have a legacy code base which uses it. But if you're somebody new, just go ahead and watch the next few videos on how to actually implement same functionality, that is component level module based resolution, but using much better approach, much cleaner approach, in which you can keep your components separate. So that would be all for this video. I'm going to see you very soon in the next one. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at a cleaner, much better approach on adding global styles, and actually styles in general in this section, to our Next.js application. Now for doing that, we need to create, at least for the global file, global styles, we need to create a file called as _app.tsx. We discussed that in the previous sections, so it should not be a problem. So this application, this app.tsx, is a very simple, non-customized app at the moment. But what we really want to do is just import our global.css right here. Now, the naming convention is again a little bit important here. First things first, it is not necessary you name it global.css. You can name it main.css as well. It's just going to work just fine. Right, so you can see that we have a .red class which gives a color of red, and inside our index page we have a class named red assigned to a heading, and we have a heading right here. So if we go ahead and restart the server, just restart the page, just refresh the page, we're gonna see that we get our heading in red, and that is because of the red class which we have inside our main.css file, right? So this is how the global styles are going to be applied. Now you might ask me that what would happen if you just go ahead and just throw it right here? Shouldn't that really work? Not really, because the way how Next.js guys came up with, you're gonna get this error. It would say that global CSS cannot be imported from other files other than your custom app. So what's happening is that Next.js is considering this import as a global import. It is considering that, hey, if you want to import this as it is, that means you want to apply the styles everywhere. And it does not really let you do that because, component styles can overlap with each other if you have overlapping classes. So it throws you an error and you cannot just view your application. So with that being out, that means that, just importing CSS like this, importing main.css or style.css or, anything like that .css, it's just possible in _app.tsx. But hang on, we're gonna see another way in the next video. But for this video, what we have right here is that you can go ahead and make use of the global styles using a CSS import inside _app.tsx only. It would not work in a page. It would not work in any other file if it is not _app.tsx. So this is how you're going to make use of, global styles, and you can just go ahead and play around with anything you like here. It would be available as a global style. So that would be all for this video. I'm going to see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and explore how you can import component styles in your pages. By that, what I mean is that whatever styles we import are available only to your component. So the first thing first, we have seen that, main.css does not really work very nicely because we get this error. So what's happening is that Next.js has actually created a way to import the files, the CSS files inside your TypeScript or JavaScript components, and that is only when your file name ends with .module.css. So you have to make sure that you name your file as main.module.css if you want your file to be available only to a particular component. Your global file would still remain just the main.css or global.css or whatever you want, but anything which you import in your component in your page should be like this. It should be whatever the name. For example, in our case it would be index, which I'm just going to create index.module.css, right? So that's what we are doing now. So I'm going to say red again, just give it a more specificity, just a little bit of CSS weight, and I'm going to make this color green, right? Hit save. And if I go ahead and just do that, what's going to happen is that if I go ahead and refresh, what we're going to see is we don't really get anything because by default, you have to import it as like this. Now you can go ahead and make use of styles.red like that, right? So now if you go ahead and see, you're going to see that you actually get the green color. And you can see that it has actually bound your style to a specific class. So how you have to use this is by using class name and then writing styles, which is what you imported from the CSS file, and then the name of the class which you're using, right? In our case, it is .red. There's a way to make it work like this and like this as well, but it is not available natively inside Next.js as of now. So if you want to do something like that, you have to write custom configuration inside next.config.js, and we have some videos at the end which are like covering the advanced aspect of Next.js, which go over that aspect. So if you're somebody who's migrating, this is especially useful for somebody who's migrating existing code base to have this feature, just having an import style which should be local to your module, to your component, and this should work right away. So this involves the use of a Babel plugin, but yeah, that is possible, but it is available at the end of this section, end of this whole course, basically. So yeah, I mean, for the most part, this is how you're gonna make sure you work with the CSS modules, the CSS components in Next.js. Just import them like that and you're good to go. So that would be all for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just take a look at how we can use Sass inside Next.js. And Sass is basically, for those of you who don't really know, it's sort of just like how TypeScript is for JavaScript, Sass also adds a lot of power to CSS and compiles down to CSS only. So Next.js supports Sass natively. You just have to go ahead and, just rename. We're not going to rename the global file. We just can rename the component one. And what I'm going to do is import it just like this. And that's it. That's all we really need to do. I guess if we could just refresh, restart the server once, that would be awesome. And if we go ahead and refresh it, we are probably going to see, I think we have, yeah, I guess we need to install Sass first. That's the only thing we need to do because Next.js won't really ship with Sass. And I'm just gonna save it as a development binary also because we don't really need Sass on production anyway. So once we have that, I can run dev again and we should be up and running in no time. So if we go ahead and refresh it now, you can see that we get still the same behavior, but now with the SCSS, that is a Sass file. The benefit of this, well, to start with, you can now nest the styles. So I can say this is color red. And if I go ahead and write a span here and I say I am red and C, so we can get red here and heading like that. And it just nicely compiles down to our CSS, but it is much more maintainable when you're using Sass. Well, you get support for everything now, the Sass variables. If you want to create some sort of duplicate styles over and over, so you can write a function in Sass, you can loop over stuff, so all that stuff. But for the most part, you're just gonna make use of the nesting a lot. So that is what it is. Sass ships out of the box as well. Sass support shifts out of the box as well with Next.js. You just need to install the Sass package and you are done. So that's pretty much it for adding the Sass support to our applications as far as I'm concerned, because Next.js, other than that, inside of the CSS moduling system follows the same thing as inside the Sass moduling system follows the same thing as CSS one. That is, you need to end your CSS files with that.module.scss and so on and so forth. So that would be all for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, I just want to take a little bit of time to just tell you how you can organize your pages in Next.js so that you don't have a lot of clutter here. So how you should technically create things is that inside pages, just create a new folder. Actually, inside pages, create a new folder with whatever page you have. For example, this is my page 1, right? And now inside this page 1, create an index.tsx file. When you do that, what's going to happen is that your page contents are still accessible on your domain.com/page1, but now all the contents, all the relevant contents, in our case it would be just tsx file and the styles file, would be available inside this page 1 only. So we can have a styles.module.scss right here, and I can just go ahead and say that, red is a color red, right? And now I can go ahead and just say export default function. Page 1 is, return h1, class name, and then styles dot red, and let's just go ahead and import the styles from our styles.module.scss file, right? So this is all we need, and now we have a nice little page with us which has the view and the logic and the styles part separated. So if you go ahead and view page 1 right here, what you're gonna see is that nothing happens because we have no content there, but once I write hello there, we get hello in red. So that was just a quick little instruction on how you can organize things. I prefer folders, and actually folders would be very helpful as well when you're creating dynamic routes and stuff. So just keep that practice with you when you're starting off. So that would be all for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this section, we're going to be exploring the API section of Next.js, learn about what that is, how you can work with that, why is that useful, and maybe just create a little bit of small application around that as well. So pretty excited to start this section, and yeah, let's just do it. I'm gonna see you super quick in the next video. Alright, so when we started the project, you must have observed that we have a API folder as well inside pages, which looks something like this. Now, what does that mean? Why is it different? Let's just discuss that in this video. So this API folder is special in the sense that the files you create, the TypeScript or JavaScript files you create in this folder should not export a React component. What do I mean by that? Let's see. So if I have let's say a file named as random number.ts, right? What I have to do is just export default function, and here it should not be a React component, because for React components we have pages, right? But for the files inside API folder, this is basically a REST API endpoint, which you can use to return responses like JSON response, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get two parameters right here. The first one is going to be Next API request type, and the second one is going to be Next API response type. Response, right? So we can get those types from our Next package. And if you're familiar with Express, you know what these request and response are. Next.js sort of also follows a similar pattern, but the thing is you have to export a single function from a single file. And this endpoint right here is automatically available on, for us at least, it is HTTP localhost 3000/API/random number, right? So this is for us. If you're running on a different port, that's a different story for you. So if I go ahead and save this file, you're gonna see nothing really happens because I think we don't have the server running. So that's my bad. But anyway, if we refresh this, you're gonna see that it keeps on loading. Now the reason it keeps on loading is because we are not really returning any response at all from this function, right? So let's just do this page a favor and say rest.json, which is going to return a JSON response. I'm just gonna say, status okay. And if we take a look now, refresh this, you can see we get a nice little status okay response from us. This is something which we cannot do with pages, right? If you try to, there's just not any res or request or res here. We cannot really do res.return res.json. Even if you try to do that, I'm just showing you that this won't work because inside pages, the Next.js actually, expects you to return a component, not just any API call. So this won't work inside pages, but this would work brilliantly when you're inside the API folder. So when you say rest.json, again, this would look familiar to Express guys. It could return a JSON response to you automatically by just taking care of the content type and the status code. Status code would be 200 in this case, so that should not be a problem. So once we have that in place, I think this is a pretty solid intro to the API. And what we can do is just go ahead and instead of status okay, I can say number is math.random times 10. And this would give us a number between 0 to 9. If I just float it down, that is, right? So now whenever I refresh, you're gonna see that we get a random number every time, 1, 3, 5, 8, stuff like that. So this is our random API, which is just returning us a random number inside of a JSON response. And yeah, that's how you're gonna create a very simple API with Next.js. So it could have a lot of uses. For example, if you're using JWT authentication in Next.js, you can use an API endpoint. You can deploy these individual functions as Lambda functions as well, so they can upscale and downscale independently, right? So this is also one important benefit we can have. You can use the Lambda functions for Auth login as well. For example, sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, Apple, stuff like that. So there are a lot of good use cases. I use these on CodeDam as well. For the Auth login especially. So yeah, that's all for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one where we are gonna be using this in a much more sort of organized way in some sort of application. So that's all for here, and I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next video. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and explore the request and response objects a little bit more, because I don't think we have done enough research on them yet. So because we are using TypeScript, we can get all the benefits of autocomplete right at our disposal. So if I try to write request dot, you're gonna see we have a bunch of methods and properties enabled for us, but some of the interesting properties, let's just go over through them. So the first thing is request.body, obviously, because if you're trying to, let's just say if I console log request.body right here, and let's say request body is something like this. So if you open this, and if we go ahead and if I try to copy this API, and let me just go ahead and fetch this real quick with a method of post and body of, hello, something like that, right? And hit enter. So you can see right here, I received on my node end the request body hello. Now this is actually beneficial in the case that I'm sending JSON data as the body. So we'll have more tutorials on that in terms of authentication and everything, but I'm just giving you an idea here. Stringify, and I have, something as username is admin and password is admin, right? And if I just do one more thing, that is just setting up the headers as well, so that we have the content type as application JSON, because that's what we want to receive at the backend, and hit enter. What we're going to see is that at the backend, instead of getting a string, which is what we are sending inside the body, we actually get a parsed down object from the actual request.body. So I can literally just go ahead and say request.body.username, and if I perform the same request one more time, it's going to give me admin, just like that, which was the username. So this is the request.body thing. We have a little bit of other things as well. So you have, let's see, request.cookies, which might be important when we are dealing with cookies. So we'll just take a look at that. Request.headers is also interesting if you are trying to get custom headers out of a particular request. Then let's see what we have. Request.query is also interesting. So if we have just like there, and if I try to do q is equal to 1 here, what we're going to see is in our request query, this should be query actually, obviously. So our query is q equal to 1, and it is automatically parsed as an object for you. So you don't have to really parse it yourself, right? Then there are, for the most part, this is what you're going to use. Request.url is something you can use as well, but for the most part, that's all you're going to make use of, right? So this is how the request object looks like. Let's just take a look at response object now real quick. So response, we obviously have seen the JSON part with this thing. So it allows you to send JSON responses, but we have a lot of interesting things apart from that as well. Let's just start that. So we have, let's see, we have JSON, obviously. We have rest.send in case you want to send, any other data which is not JSON, right? So if you want to send something like this instead of, just JSON response, you can use this. So rest.send is going to take care of that. Again, it's an abstraction over all the real methods which we have, but for the most part, it just works. So we get 3 or 4 because we have already loaded this page once, but it's going to take care of all the things. Then let's just keep on moving. We have rest.set header, which is also interesting. So we can have, X custom header, and I don't know, we are open to hire people, something like that, just to add a little bit of interest to your application. And for the most part, we can just use this, refresh. And if you take a look inside your response headers now, you can see that you have a custom header now. We are open to hire people, right? Pretty cool. You can also use the set header to actually set cookie. So set cookie could also be something like that. And we can say, are you programmer equal to true, right? And if I go ahead and refresh this now, you can see that it sets a cookie. And now if I go ahead and take a look at document.cookie, we actually get, are you a programmer as true as a cookie which is set by inside the browser. Useful for authentication again. All right, let's just keep on moving. Let's see what else we got. So we have obviously the status code with us. So if you want to set status code at 404 and response, you can do that. So you can see inside networks now, we get a 404 as the status code of our document. You can basically do any status code you like. Obviously, just make sure you're playing inside the REST status code. So you can do 4013. I don't know if you can do some ridiculous status codes. Yeah, apparently you can. But don't really go ahead and try those. Can we do 1337? No, not really. Well, you can do I'm a teapot. I don't remember its status code. It was somewhere around 104 or something. Yeah, no, not really. Anyway, I don't really want to blow this up. So I'm just going to keep it as status code 200, which is 200 okay. Everyone knows that. Right, so this is again one interesting property which you can set. Let's see what else is interesting here. There's also a method which I remember, which is rest.end, right? So rest.end can be used to just, it's pretty much like just status rest.send, but rest.end is more explicit, that you are actually closing the response stream now. Hello, how are you? So if you do that, and if you try to send more content down the line, what's going to happen is that you're going to get an error from the server that cannot set header. Well, you get this error, but the actual idea is that you cannot really send any headers or body because the response stream has been ended. So anyway, that's pretty much it for how we're going to interact a little bit with REST and request and response. There's a lot more we can do when we introduce middlewares and cookies and stuff like that, which would be very useful in authentication and stuff. But for the most part, this is how you can get started with the API's endpoint. So that's all for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and build a very, very simple JWT based authentication inside Next.js. So first things first, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and actually install, I'm gonna say npm install JSON web token, right? So because this is a package which would enable us to actually do a lot of fun stuff with JSON web tokens. So I'm gonna install the types for this as well. As far as I remember, they are available. So let's just go ahead and do that, because that would enrich our experience of working with the package. And yep, so here we are. I'm just gonna minimize this. What I want to do is let's just get rid of the page one for now. I'm gonna go ahead, remove this, and I'm gonna create a very, very simple form back in 80s, like that. Input type text, value admin, let's just keep that, and password as value admin as well, right? Just give it a little BR because I'm too lazy for actual CSS. And input type submit, value login, right? We can give it a form method post, and let's see. I'm gonna say action is /API/login, right? So once we do that, what we're gonna see is actually, let me just get rid of these as well. Once we do that and go to our home page, we get a nice little form with us, which is absolutely destroyed by my password manager. So let's just leave that. But what's going to happen is if I go ahead and rename this to login.ts, and if I go ahead and just do a console.log of request.body so as to see what we are getting, let's just refresh this, hit login, and in the console we get nothing because I think I did not really save it. Let's just refresh this one more time, and we still did not see anything, but we were submitting. I think we are not really submitting anything as well. So to do that, we have to actually give the name as username and password, right? And now one more time, if we try to log in, what we are gonna see is username as admin and password as admin, which is perfect, right? So what we really want to do is we want to extract out username and password from our request.body, right? First of all, I'm just going to say if request.body is not available, then I'm just going to say rest.status code is 404 and rest.end error, right? And return, because we don't want any further processing. Otherwise, we are, inside this. Then what I want to do is I just want to say that a token in this case is going to be JWT, that is the package which we are going to import now. So import JWT from JSON web token, jwt.sign, and I'm going to say username is whatever it is, and I'm going to say it is admin or not on the basis of username is in fact equal to admin and password is in fact equal to admin, right? We're just gonna set the admin field to true if that is a fulfilled criteria, otherwise not. And for the key, I'm just gonna go ahead and just be lazy about it and just smash my head on the keyboard. So this way we are just creating a signed JSON token which we are returning using an API. And yep, if I refresh this, you can see we get a nice little token for us, which is a JSON web token. And if I go ahead and copy this whole bad boy and go to jwt.io, which can be used for decoding JSON web tokens, which is basically a base64 only, but it's still convenient. So if I go ahead and paste it here, you can see that this is the data which we have. And in fact, this is an admin because username and password were both admin. But if we go ahead and try to log in with something else, oops. Oh, I think we made sure that this is always admin. So this should be actually default value, not value. Admin 123 and login. And then if we go ahead and take a look at this, what we're going to see is that this is admin false, right? And we cannot really change it on the client side because JWT tokens are secure. So first things first, let's just move from 1980s to 2020. So I'm going to say that on click, let's just make this a button first of all. On click, I'm going to say submit form. And what this submit form is that it's going to perform a request to our backend server. So I'm going to say my response from the API is fetch API, and what do we have? Login, right? I'm going to say method is post. Our body is json.stringify username password. And again, because we are in 2020 now, let's just make use of the React state with us, right? So I'm going to say a similar thing for password, set password, and let's just import this bad boy. And finally, we can switch back to value one more time. This is username and this is password. Nice and easy, right? One last thing which we want to do is say on change, the event should set username to e.target.value, and a similar thing should happen for password as well, that is set password. Awesome. So now once we have the response from the server, we want to convert it into JSON response because our server is also responding us inside JSON. And then we can finally take out the token by saying rest.token, because that is essentially what we get back from the server, an object which has a key, which is the token for us, right? So I can just go ahead and say that if we have in fact a token, what we can do is we can just go ahead and update the message. Message set message is useState a string, which is empty message, you are not logged in. And I can just go ahead and say we have a message in terms of h1 at the top. right? And once we have set message with us, what I can do is I can first of all go ahead and import JWT from JSON Web Token again, because we can use a single package on server and client as well. Why shouldn't we? So I'm going to say my JSON is JSON jwt.decode my token, right? And I'm going to say JSON, I'm going to just say welcome to JSON.username and UR, and I'm going to just say JSON dot let's see, I think we need to await for this. Oh, not really. This is synchronous as well, but we can just return it as a combination of object whose key is string and the value is also string. So yeah, actually let me just go ahead and remove this. Welcome JSON.username and UR, and we're just going to check JSON.admin is true, an admin, otherwise not an admin. That's it, right? Else set message something went wrong, whatever. All right, so once we have that in place, let's just go ahead and take a look at our home page now. So we have a message, you are not logged in. Let's just try admin as the combination. We get welcome undefined and you are not an admin. Fair enough. So let's just first of all console log our JSON, what we are getting. And let's just move to console. Let's console, click on login, and we get admin as false, and that is the case. I think, yeah, that is because we are not really setting the headers to content type application JSON right here, because we are transmitting JSON data, right? So we need to make sure the backend knows that. Now if I click on login, yeah, that's the right response now. So we see welcome admin and you are an admin, right? However, if I try to do something like username something, login, we get welcome username something and you are not an admin. Similarly, if I have admin here but the password is incorrect, we have welcome admin and you are not an admin. But once we do admin, we are an admin, right? So again, very simple dumb example of JWT tokens with Next.js API. Just showing you a simple use case of that, because you cannot really fake the integrity of JWT tokens unless you don't really have the key from the server, and because the key is on the server, you cannot change response. Now on the basis of this, what you can do is, for example, you can have a secret.ts key, and what we can just do is say export default function. Right here I can say const token from request.body. Request is next API request, and response is next API response, right? And I can say, just take out the admin field out of jwt.verify, import JWT from JSON Web Token. I can say token and key, right? And we can just, for the time being lazy, we can just import it like that. And I can just say as an object which is having string as keys and string as values, right? So I can just say, or rather boolean as the value, right, in our case. So I'm just going to say if admin is true, rest.json secret admin code 1 2 3 4 5, right? Else rest.json admin false. So once we have that in place, what we can do is we can go ahead and on the client we can just implement a secret like the following. So again, we can have a secret message, set secret, and we can just make sure this is empty at the moment. And finally, what we can do is, if we have a token, obviously, we can say await again this whole thing actually. So I'm just going to copy this, but this time this should be secret. We have a application JSON, and now we are just passing in the token for the further requests. So this would be our token because we already have access to the token. And then I can say if rest.secret is available to us, secret admin code actually, I can just say set secret as rest.secret admin code. Else set secret nothing available, right? And I can just say secret as secret. All right, so now if I go ahead and try to log in with admin, hit login, you're gonna see we get welcome admin and you are an admin, and I guess secret 12345. But if I make a mistake, you're gonna see that we do not have anything available as a secret. So you can basically just go ahead and store this JSON token, JSON web token, and use it for further requests. A very popular approach for authentication, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for this quick little demonstration. Hopefully this would be useful. This is not really a Next.js project. We have Next.js projects later on down the line if you're watching this course on Codedam, where we'll create e-commerce and all those blogs and fun stuff. But yeah, this is just a quick dirty implementation of something with Next.js and Next.js API routes so that you get an idea about how things are working. And of course, you might have seen that, most of the thing is React only, even with Next.js. Plus, the only added advantage, the actual good advantage is that, you get all this HTML right off the box from Next.js framework. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new section in Next.js. This is going to be a routing section in which we'll be seeing simple routing and complicated routing as well eventually as we go through, and some of the new changes which Next.js brings in to the framework. So starting off, this video would be on simple routing. You can already see that I'm on localhost port 3000, and if I switch to my text editor, you're gonna see that we do not have a lot of files, just the index.tsx and the _app.tsx file. So this is how it looks like as of now. Let's just go ahead and remove a bunch of these things except for, let's say, a single link, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and remove all of this, and I'm gonna remove the footer as well. And I'm just gonna go ahead and change this indentation to tabs because that's what I use. So here we are. Now we just have a single link with our on our website, and that is also using just regular ahref tags. So first things first, inside simple routing, understand two things. The first thing is that inside this pages folder, right, when you create any file that is a TypeScript or a JavaScript. Now, if you're working in a TypeScript project, that would end with a .tsx or with a .ts. If it ends with .tsx or .ts, and if it is a valid JavaScript file which is exporting a functional component, Next.js would automatically make it a page. By that, what I mean is that you can literally go ahead and write here mehul.tsx and just export default a function which should be a React component, ponent, compo, compo. I'm pretty sure I spelled it wrong, but anyway, let's just proceed. So by what I mean that it should be a React component, that means that it should return some JSX expression, right? Not really expression, but a JSX element. So as to speak, it could be just like, hello, or as simple as just a string as well. But it should not be returned undefined, right? It could be returned null because null is a valid JSX element, but it should not be returned undefined. So as long as the default import in a file, which is a valid TypeScript or JavaScript file, depending on your project setup, is returning a valid React component, that is returning a valid JSX element, you have a page for yourself. Now, once you have mehul.tsx, what you're going to see is that now if you go ahead and visit localhost 3000/mehul, it's going to say hello, right? So I can just say hello from mehul, right? So that we are clear that we are on mehul. So you can see that it dynamically automatically generated it, right? It won't be mehul.tsx. It would be nothing like that. On any other page, you're going to get a 404. It would be just mehul without any extension, anything at all. So this is how simple routing inside of this Next.js works. That is, you just go ahead, create a file, export a function which returns a React component, and that's it. You're done. Now you can go ahead and visit the / whatever it is, and it will automatically be there. Next.js actually borrowed this concept from PHP. So if you have been a PHP developer back in the days, you know that PHP works just like this. You just create a file and you can directly go ahead and visit that file, and it will be just, the output would be served just out of the box. So this is how Next.js works. But anyway, nonetheless, routing is more complicated in Next.js than in PHP, which has, brings its own benefits. So we're going to take a look at that in the next video. So that's all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just take a look at the link component, which you're going to be using all the time on your website, why that is important and how it works. So we have, just like you see, we have an index page and we have a mehul page, right? So you can see that if I go to localhost 3000, we're going to get something like this. And if I go to localhost 3000 mehul, we get this content. So far, so good. Now, obviously, in every case, you're going to need some links on your website so that people can navigate around, right, on different pages. Now, one option is to have these ahrefs links like this. But the disadvantage to this, and let me just go ahead and show you, if I have a link something like, mehul, because that is where our page is located, right? So if I go to welcome to my blog, if I do something like this, go back, and if I try to click on this, pay close attention to what happens here. You're going to see that the page actually reloads, right? So you see that we have actually created a conventional website which is reloading when I click on a link, right? So it's fetching the document again from the server, all that regular thing is happening. But we can make use of the dynamic nature of React. That is, we can make use of the functionality that we do not have to fetch the whole HTML of the page. By that, what I mean is that internal routing could make sure that the experience of the user is very smooth between the pages in terms of page transitions. So there's not a jump, but in fact a smooth change of page, which pretty much feels like native application. So how do we do that? Well, we cannot really do that with the regular anchor tag because Next.js does not know about this any much. But what we can make use of is something known as the link tag from next link, right? So you have to import it from next/link, and it's a default import as of now. So what you have to do pretty much is just go ahead and wrap this a tag inside a link and give it an href of same as you have in the a tag and remove the href from the a tag. Now, why do you remove this? Because Next.js would automatically pass down this href to this anchor tag, and that is it. You do not have to pass any other tag, and we're going to discuss this again in the complicated routing, and that is like the nested routing, and the dynamic routing. But earlier you also had to pass in something known as, which was your real link. But with Next.js 9.5.3 onwards, you don't even have to do that. The href would work just fine without any changes at all. So now if we take a look at the blog again, the website again, just pay close attention to the state of the page. So if I click on this, you can see it instantaneously loads and it is not reloaded, right? So you can see if I go back with my browser window, browser button, I can just click and, go back, click, go back, click, go back. It's instantaneous, it's fast, right? And that is made possible with all the optimizations Next.js brings in, like, preloading and stuff. So we can cover preloading a little bit, but yeah, I would really want to have that in a separate video anyway. So yeah, that was a quick little introduction to link and how you can do simple routing with it. We're gonna make use of link again in complicated routing, but that's all for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just take a look at nested routing, which means that not only you can just send people on /Mehul, but you can also send people on /Mehul/activities, right? So how do you do that? Well, you see that the basic instinct would be that if Mehul.tsx gets us to Mehul, then, maybe Mehul/activities.tsx would get us there. Well, it's partly right, but the thing is, instead of having a slash in the file name, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a folder named Mehul, right? And I'm gonna move this Mehul.tsx file inside this Mehul. So now what's happening is that whenever I access /Mehul, we would be inside this folder, right? And any file that is present inside this folder would act something like, just like which is acting inside this pages folder. By that, what I mean is, can you guess what's going to happen? Or maybe can you guess how I can access this Mehul file on the browser? Well, yeah, to access this, first of all, I have to get inside the folder, which is, this Mehul folder. And then because this file itself is named Mehul, what I have to do is write Mehul one more time. Now, when I do that, then I can only get access to, this thing. So I'm basically doing localhost 3000 /Mehul to get to this particular file. Now, how do I get it on just Mehul, but with, as the folder structure? Well, I can just go ahead and rename that to index, right? And now if I go ahead and take a look and just go to /Mehul, that is what we're gonna get. A default file just like earlier, but inside a folder this time. Now, what advantage does it give us over a single file? The advantage now we have is that we can have nested routes, right? So now I can create activities.tsx. I can just borrow this from here and I can say Mehul activities. And what I can go ahead and do is say that, we have this as activities. And I can go back on the home page and click on this, and you can see that we are now inside the activities page, right? Directly inside activities page, which is, just sitting with our index page as well. So that's how nested routes would work. And basically you can nest it to any depth which you want, but for the most part, you're not going to need more than maybe 4 or 5 levels of depth. That's the max you're going to go for a medium to large size projects as well. So yeah, that's how nested routing would work. There's also something known as dynamic routing, which we're going to cover next, because dynamic routing is more fun than nested routing because you get access to a number of routes without actually caring about them. So that's all for this video. I'm going to see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, we're going to take a look at how we can create dynamic routes in Next.js and how we can just go ahead and work with that. So we have seen how to work with nested routes, but what if you want to have a dynamic route? For example, let's say you have a blog built on Next.js, which we're going to create later on. So there's a dedicated section where we create an actual blog built with Next.js. So in cases like those, you don't really know the later on slug for the blog post, right? It could be anything. So how do you deal with that? Well, for that, you have dynamic routes. So let's just go ahead and let's just say I go ahead and delete this and I create a page called fruit, right? And right here, what I want to do is, in fact, let me just go ahead and delete this as a folder, or yeah, let's just keep that. So anyway, because we'll need, that will make things a little bit more clear. So we have a fruit folder, and now what I want is anyone who visits something like, localhost 3000, whatever, then fruit, then apple, then this apple should be displayed on the screen. Or maybe we just want to do something with this apple. But I don't really want to hard code all the fruits with all the files because that would be waste of resources, right? So to deal with that, what we have to do is we have to create a special file in Next.js which starts with a bracket, with a square bracket to be more precise, right? And ends with a square bracket. So here I'm going to write something like name.tsx, and this could be anything in between the brackets, right? It does not really matter. What matters is that you create this file with an opening square bracket and a closing square bracket. That is very, very important. And this should be just, before the .tsx. You don't have to, enclose the whole file name in square brackets, just the part of the file before the extension in square brackets. So once you have that in place, let's just go ahead and, just go ahead and export a regular component. Nothing fancy here. I'm just gonna say h1 hello, right? But what's interesting about this is once you have this in place, what this means literally is that go ahead on fruit, that is fruit, and capture anything else you write and send it to this particular file, right? By that, what I mean is that, for example, this URL which you're seeing right now and this URL, which is anything random, are going to point at this particular file only. Next.js is going to use the logic from this file for serving both of these routes, and in reality all of the routes like this. What Next.js would not serve, however, is just the fruit route, right? So if you just go to the fruit route, it's going to send in a 404. So if you want to make it serve that route as well, you can just go ahead and create index.tsx file, or you can maybe just try to catch all the routes, which we're going to see in the next video. But yeah, for this video, what we have in place is you have a dynamic section of routing in place. And mind you that this would works. This would also works, but this right here, ABC, section 1 and ABC would not work. Why is that? Because you see, now you have two segments, not one, and you're just listening for the one segment with the square brackets, right? So if you go ahead and take a look at ABC and 1, 2, 3 here, you're gonna see we get a 404. We get a 404 on this page. Again, this is because two segments of URL and would not work, right? So how would you make, how would you catch this thing? Well, what you can do is, instead of creating this as a file, let me just go ahead and, or maybe just keep it right like that. Let me just go ahead and create a folder, which is name now. Now again, just like I said, this could be anything. And inside this, I create another thing, which is something like subname. Now what's going to happen is, now we're going to start catching these guys, right? Because now we have a dynamic segment. We have, first of all, we have fruit, then we have a part of dynamic segment, then we have another part of dynamic segment, which we can now catch. So if I go ahead and refresh it now, you're going to see we are able to catch it now. But what this would have resulted in is that we would have lost the ability to catch the first dynamic segment now. So anything on the first dynamic segment stops working. So how do you make that work as well? Well, all you have to do is just create an index.tsx file here. Because remember, when you're accessing just this name segment, what Next is looking for is basically the index.tsx file. Either a name.tsx file, which is not really there because now we have a folder, or this index.tsx file, which we looked in the last video as well, how the routing really worked. So once we have this index.tsx file, you can see when I go to fruit name, that's it, just the name part, that is the first dynamic segment, it's going to fall back to the index.tsx file. So now if I go ahead and, hello from first segment, and if I go ahead and pick this first URL, hit it, you're going to see we get hello from first segment. However, if I pick this URL with two segments, we're going to get just hello, which is the message from our subname component, right? Now, what's the essence of this name and subname, and why do we have named it like that? Well, it does not really matter, but the essence for the names is that you can use these properties, you can use these names to extract out the route you are accessing. That is these values, JD, SFH, whatever that is, section 1, ABC. So you can have name as section 1 in your code and subname as ABC in your code, right? For We're going to take a look at how we can do that with the useRouter hook, but that's the essence of the name. That's why I wanted to tell you that. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for the dynamic part. That's as much you're going to need. For the most part, this is what you're going to need for dynamic things, right? Because you won't be going a lot beyond this unless you have very special use cases. This covers almost everything you're going to need with Next.js routing. So that's all for this video. I'm going to see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just take a look at the useRouter hook, which I was talking about in the last one. And this hook is basically, you can think of something which you can use to programmatically control navigation and access these parameters, stuff like that in Next.js, right? So what you have to do is just go ahead and write const router is useRouter. Oops, not useReducer, but useRouter. And I have no idea why the hell autocomplete doesn't work for Next.js modules, but that's all we have. And this is, you're going to import it like this, right? So once you have the router with you, what's going to happen is that this router contains a bunch of useful things, right? So if you just go ahead and console log this router object right here, what you're going to see is that if I go to, we are on the subname, right? So if I go to the console now, what's going to happen is that we get this object twice because, you know, it might have rendered twice. That's why we have two console log statements, but that does not really matter a lot. So you see that this is what this router object contains. So it contains as path, which is our real path of the location. We have the back, which could be used to programmatically send the user back in history. We also have base path, you know, some common things. We also have components, which is not, you know, something which you should use directly, but yeah, it is there. We have events. We have the prefetch thing for prefetching the URLs. The interesting part is this thing. We have the query object with us. So you see Next.js, what's going to do, it's going to split, it's going to sort of explode your URL, your dynamic URL, on the basis of how and what were the dynamic paths. So you see that we have a file structure of fruit, then a folder named dynamically named name, and then a dynamic file named subname. So Next.js, what it did is broke the query, that is broke our URL into two parts. The name is section 1 and subname is ABC, which it picked up from the URL. So if you go to ABCD, what's going to happen is you're going to get a similar thing in the query. Name is section 1 and subname is ABCD now, right? So you can pretty much go ahead and write here anything, and that is what's going to happen. So what you can do essentially is you can just go ahead and print out router.query.name and router.query.subname right here, and see that this subname matches with this, that is the file name, and this name matches with this, right? So you can name them anything else. You can even name it Mehul. Then you're gonna write router.query.mehul here instead of subname. So once you do that, you can see pretty much we start getting our messages here. So I can say hello to name, and I can get hello ABCD, and I can also name you know, hello there. Oops, hello there. There you are. Right, so you see that then we get there later on. So we have hello as the first and there as the next one. So this is what the useRouter does, right? One thing which is very important for production level applications is that useRouters sometimes would not work as you would expect. So you see that on its first render, the query object is actually empty, right? The reason for that is that Next.js is going to make the query object empty if you do not have any prefetching conditions. By prefetching conditions, I mean that if you do not have any, you know, things like getServerSideProps or getStaticProps in place. So we're going to discuss about getStaticProps and getServerSideProps in the later section. It is very important and very useful concept of Next.js. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just to know how you're gonna fix that is you're gonna know that in the getStaticProps video. But yeah, this is something which is easily fixable. So anyway, that's how you're gonna make use of useRouter. Now I can just go ahead and just create a button here on click, which take me home, which is something like this, right? And what I want to do is when I fire this, when I click on this button, router should go to the home page, right? So now you have a couple of ways to do that. Firstly, you have a push and then you have a replace. Now let's just go ahead home and take a look at what both of them does. Let's just go ahead and take a look at push. I'm gonna give it just a slash because that's where we want to go, right? So router.push slash, that's it. So if I click on this, you can see that we immediately go back to home. Now what push did is that it pushed the home onto the history of stack of history, right? By stack of history, what I mean is that when I click on back button, I'll go back to the page. So if I click it again, I'm on the home page, I click back, I'm back to that page. What replace would do, however, is it would replace that particular page from the stack history altogether. By that, what I mean is that now when I go ahead and click on this, and if I try to click back, I would not go back on the same page. Now you might think I'm there, but let's just try this with something like, let me just go ahead and open this in a new tab. And now let me just go ahead and click this. So I'm at the home page, we are using replace. And if I click on this back, you see I came back to my new tab and not the previous page, because that previous page was replaced in the history with the home page. So this is the difference between the router.push and router.replace pages. So yeah, that's pretty much it for what you're gonna need for useRouter. That's all you're gonna need for the most part, the router.query and the dynamic pushing of the routes here and there on buttons. I would say personally try to use link component as much as you can, because it's good for SEO, it's good for accessibility, and people can actually see that they are about to click a link. But for places like where you need programmatic navigation, router is unbeatable. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just take a look at catch all routes in Next.js. Now, just like I told you how you can create, just the name and subname and all that thing. You can have hello there, just like that. Now, how about you want to go 3 levels deep, right? So you can easily see that if you're doing it in the file structure, it can get a little bit messy as you create more and more folders, especially in cases when you don't know the depth of the link. So in that case, you can literally never guess how many folders you need here. So for that case, what you have is you have something known as catch all routes. By that, what I mean is, let me just go ahead and delete this whole name folder, right? And just create a single file inside this fruit, which is again starting and ending with a square bracket, but this time it would be something like name, but with 3 dots in front of it. And if you observe it carefully, it's sort of like how we try to accept a number of arguments in a function as an array in JavaScript. So if you have something like function sum, and you do something like this, console log, and if you just go ahead and call this as 1 2 3 4 5, what's going to happen is that it's going to console log this as something like this, right? So you have an array of values which were passed. So anyway, with this optional, not really optional, but with this catch all route system, what you can do is you can just say export default function, my fruit, anything, does not really matter a lot. What we can do is we can just go ahead and first of all make use of router, so that we can actually see the routes which we are talking about. So import useRouter from Next.router, and then finally we can go ahead and just return h1 hello. But what we want is we want to console log the router.query, right? Because this is where the magic would happen. So once we have that in place, let's just go back and try to refresh this page, and you can see that we get hello even though we were 3 levels nested. And in the console, if we check the router.console, you can see we got 3 values inside the name key now, because name was our destructured, how we destructured these values, and we got hello there and DSF, whatever it was, in the specific order of their occurrence, right? So the first one was hello, the first element is hello, and so on and so forth. So I can go down and I can basically, type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you're gonna see that you get pretty much the same thing all the way down, right? So you start with 1 and all the way to 10 in the specific order. That is like important thing. So yeah, I mean, this is how you're gonna catch all the routes in a particular directory, or maybe, if you're brave enough, just place this inside your root directory. The other thing is optionally catching all the routes. By that, what Next.js really means is that, just like we saw that, if you just go to /root, it's going to throw you 404. But in a lot of cases, you might just want this file to cover this use case as well, instead of like manually creating index.jsx and then having the same code in place for that as well. So for those cases, what you can do is you can go ahead and have another set of brackets just like that. Once you have that in place, if you go ahead and refresh this, you're going to see that now Next.js also catches the base of your, the base domain inside this particular file itself. One very important thing to note here is that you can see this time the query object is empty. It does not have the name key with an empty array. The object itself is empty, right? So that is an important thing which you should remember when you're using optional catch-all. This might change, this behavior might change in future, but this is how it is right now. So you can see now if you go to depth, it starts working just like you're gonna expect it to. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So that's how you're gonna create dynamic routes with optional path length and be done with it, and with just have a single file to handle it. I mean, it could be very useful for a lot of things, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just take a quick look at a 404 page you can create in Next.js. Now there's a whole other domain for custom pages as well, but 404 is the most common use case of error pages. So right now you see that if I go to a domain or go to a path like this, we get this page. Now obviously your business requirements might be different, but to create a different 404 page, all you have to do is just go ahead and inside the directory create a 404.tsx file. That is, just 404. Now remember, this does not mean that you can create files for different status codes as well. This 404.tsx or 404.js, whatever you are creating, depending on your project structure, this file name is actually hard coded into Next.js, right? So you just cannot create, 405, and if there's a 405 error from the server, that would be so. No, that won't how it work. So just go ahead and export default function, my 404, and I'll just return h1 404, right? Simple as that. Now if I go ahead and refresh this, you can see that now I get a different 404. That is something which I wrote. Simple as that, just again yet another React component. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, because I won't really bore you with something which is not really required. So that's all for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just finally start with one of the most important things in Next.js, that is the getStaticProps function. Now, what this function really is to explain this, I just have to go ahead and create, let's say, a file. I'm gonna say maybe dynamic.tsx. Why not? Let's just go ahead and create a function which is just dynamic and return h1 dynamic. Nothing dynamic about that as of now. But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna export another function from this file, which is not going to be a default export, because obviously we did export a default function, but that is going to be a getStaticProps function. So I'm going to say export const getStaticProps. Now you can type this if you want, getStaticProps. If you want, that's where the TypeScript would shine and it would just correct us with the things. And you're gonna have something known as the context for this function, right, being passed to you. Now you can clearly see it throws me a warning, an error, whatever it is, that we need to return an object from this particular function, right? So let's just go ahead and do that exactly. I'm going to return an object, but it needs more than an object. It needs a props property, which should be an object. So for now, I'm just going to say my favorite number is 4, like that, right? I'm not making use of this context, doing nothing at all. What this does, however, is before your function is executed, Next.js is going to execute this function right here in terms of server, right? So this function executes on server. You can think on execution on server, right? And this function right here is executed obviously on client as well as on server. But for the most part, you can think of this that Next.js is going to execute this on server, take whatever the return value is, take the props from that return value thing, and inject that object as props inside your component, right? So now if you try to say dynamic number is, props.myFavNumber, what's going to happen really is because this object has been dynamically inserted into this page, you're going to see a 4 here. So now if I go back and go to dynamic, hit enter, you can see dynamic number is 4. If I go ahead and change this to 5 and refresh, you're going to see we get a dynamic number 5, right? And you can clearly see that if I go to the page source, dynamic number, and you can see that this thing is actually present in the source code itself. You can see the 5 is here, right? It's not injected on the client by some JavaScript magic. It's actually rendered on the on the backend by Next.js and is sent to the client. But you can see clearly that Next.js actually injects my favorite number as 5 prop as well in the page. Now, why is that? Well, one of the reasons you can think of is that suppose if you're coming to this page from another page, then what Next.js really do is that it instead of getting this whole HTML to the client, it will just get the updated props and the template for the page, and it would dynamically construct the page, right? Because that is much cheaper than just completely navigating to a different page. But for the most part, what you have to remember is that you can see that the getStaticProps is actually helping you to have dynamic content on your page. Now you might say that this is not really dynamic, but what if I told you that you can actually require the file system here, right? Which is another thing, right? So if I have something like I don't know, let's just say we have a public robots.txt file, right? I am a file, something like that. Now if I go ahead and say my favorite number is fs.readFileSync, that is synchronously read file. And if I go back a directory into public robots.txt and I want to read it in UTF mode, and just do that, what's going to happen if I refresh it now, we get no file or folder, because we might just need to have path here as well. Well, things might get a little bit ugly for setting up the context, but path.join directory name, I think it should not be directory name, it should be process.cwd. And once we do that, what's going to happen is it's going to start from the root directory. So we just need public and things like that. Let me see what's really going wrong, what we are missing. Path.join, it's fine as well. My favorite number is txt, right? So now you can directly see that I get IAM file. I can go ahead, Inside this, I can edit, add some more dots, hit save, refresh, we get dynamic content. Again, you might think that this is not truly dynamic, and that's fine. But what's fascinating about this is that just what I'm going to show you now. With props, it actually accepts a revalidate parameter as well. That's it for this video. In the next one, we're going to see a revalidate parameter, which is extremely useful in Next.js and especially inside the getStaticProps thing. So that would be all. I'm going to see you pretty soon in the next one. All right, everyone. Now we're going to take a look at the revalidate parameter in Next.js. And what this parameter is that it allows you to do something amazing. What happens when you use a page like this, what happens is that when you push it to production, when you create the Next.js build, what's going to happen is that it's going to create a static export of this particular page, just like with the contents of this, and be done with it, right? Next.js now, whenever you visit the /dynamic, it's just going to pick up that particular file, which is it has statically created from the file system, and throw it on you. It does not bother what's in that file, nothing at all. But when you specify a special parameter called revalidate, and with let's say 10, what's going to happen is that things become interesting. Now, in 10 seconds, if there's a request to the server, in every 10 seconds, if there's a request to the server, Next.js is going to try, it's not saying that it would, it's going to try to recreate this page based on updated data. By that, what I mean is that it's going to run the getStaticProps function on the server for this page and try to update the static file which it has for this particular page. And this only works on production, so I cannot really show you on the local host for the demo, because revalidate is useless on the local host, because getStaticProps on localhost always runs, right? Just for development reasons, because it would be very hard if it's just running once. So on production, let's just take a look at this website, this nice little website. You can see I can refresh this as many times as I want, and these numbers right here are not changing, right? Because if you take a look inside the source as well, you can see 448 is actually a written number right here inside HTML, and it is actually stored on the server as a static HTML file. But let me just go ahead on this GitHub issue now and focus on the 448. You can see that I have already given it a thumbs up. Let me go ahead and remove this. So it's 447 now. If I try to refresh it, you can see it's not updating. It's very important you see this. You can see that after some time, it updates to match your number, right? And that is great, because the guy who has actually created this page, the repo, when it was built, next, you do not have to redeploy it to update this number. That is, you do not have to recreate the whole all the static files. Next.js already did that on the basis of this revalidate parameter. So this is what the revalidate parameter usually would do. That is, it would help you to refresh the pages which you think might change, but not as frequent, right? The best example for this could be blog post. So you might want to throw in a revalidate there, but maybe off 60 minutes or 2 or 3 hours, right? Because once you have the static built of the blog post, it probably won't really change, especially if the blog is very old. So yeah, that's how the revalidate parameter works in a nutshell. And that's how it works, really. So that would be all for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just take a look at another function which is very important, which works very closely with getStaticProps, and that is getStaticPaths. Now let's just go ahead inside this fruit, and let me just go ahead and name it very simply, just name. And let me just go ahead and paste it right here. Let's just get rid of this, and let's just make this math.random. Why not? Right? We have the props, and we have, let's say, we have, let's say, hello props.myFavoriteNumber. Nothing fancy, the most boring application on the planet right now. But what we are gonna learn about is not very boring, because we're gonna export another function from this file that would be named getStaticPaths, and we can type it with getStaticPaths right here, right? Which is going to help us with some of the types. So it returns an async function one more time, and you can directly see it's complaining us with a return type of something like this. So what do we really have to return from this function is an object. First things first, this object should have paths within itself. Firstly, so we have a paths, which is an array. We're gonna see what should go inside this array, and then another property, a second property, which is a fallback, right? So I'm gonna specify the fallback to false first of all. Now there are a couple of things which we need to do first of all in this before we actually learn getStaticPaths. The first thing is that whenever you implement getStaticProps inside a dynamic file, that is, a file with the square brackets around it, you have to implement this function anyway, getStaticPaths, right? getStaticProps would work fine on its own only inside a page like this, which is a standalone page, right? Dynamic.tsx is a standalone page. If you have a dynamic page, you have to use getStaticPaths, and it will make sense why you need that. You need this function because this function specifies when this static props should run, right? Now, first things first, getStaticProps runs at build time, right? It does not run at runtime. By that, what I mean is when you're gonna push this application to production, before anyone sees your application live, getStaticProps would be run for all the pages, and all the HTML files would be computed, all the JSON files would be computed, and they would be stored on the file system. That is why it works perfectly fine for static files like this, with no square brackets with them. But with files like these, they have a problem. Because static props runs at build time, you cannot create infinite number of files, obviously, right? So the second solution is to specify to getStaticProps, that is to specify to Next.js on which files you want to run this static props on, right? I hope this makes sense so far. So how do you do that? Well, getStaticPaths exactly does that, and it takes two values for this. We're gonna ignore the fallback false for now, just bear with me. This paths thing, what this is it contains the information on which particular routes you should run the static props on. So what do I mean by that? I'm gonna say params is an object, right, which contains, in our case it will just contain name because name is the dynamic part, and I say that name is hello firstly. Another object is name is world, and not really like this, inside a different object itself, right? So you can clearly see what's happening here. Let me just go ahead and see if I can make some space. I don't really think I can, but anyway, you can clearly see what's happening here. I have an object params with a name of hello, another object with the name of world, and I have a fallback of false. This is important to remember, but you can forget about this for now. So what would happen is that when you push it on production, Next.js is gonna visit these two particular URLs. It's going to say, let me just go ahead and fetch localhost 3000 fruit hello, take the output, store it on the disk, and I'm gonna go ahead and take the output world and store it on the disk, and done. That's it. Case closed. Start and done. Any other route which is here, it is going to be discarded as 404. Let's see. So now if I go to fruit and hello, you can see it works fine. If I go to world, you can see it works fine. But if I go to 1, you can see we get our 404, which is the ugliest 404 ever, but we can just delete it. And if I refresh this, you see we get 404 on a page which was supposed to be dynamic, right? So why did that happen? Let me just go through over this thing one more time. Why did that happen? You can see that we are very well inside the dynamic segment itself. Our page file name is also dynamic, so this should technically render this, but it did not do that because we have a getStaticPaths. getStaticPaths, when has a fallback of false, defines that this paths array would be the only thing that would be permissible, so as to speak. So if I go ahead and replace this hello with 1, now if I go ahead and try to visit this URL, what you're gonna see is this works now, right? Because I just added it to be permissible. But you're gonna ask me that, hey Mehul, doesn't that really defeat the whole purpose of the dynamic thing? Well, I mean, it might for you, but for some cases, this is better, right? For example, again, here you can access all the node stuff. That is, you can make DB calls, you can access file system, you can do whatever you want to do. And finally, you can create this object on the build time to have a number of parameters, have a number of things, and they would all be fetched and dynamically their static equivalents would be created, right? But what I did not really tell you about is the fallback option as true. By fallback true, what's going to happen is that this thing is still going to happen. You know, when you're building, build start. When the build starts, Next.js is going to visit this hello right here. Next.js is going to visit this world right here, but it would not be done, right? What's going to happen instead is that if you have a fallback of true here, it is still open to any other URL as well, right? It is still open to any other URL, but it would not statically create the HTML content of it on the build time, right? So if you go ahead and visit this later on, what's going to happen is that it's going to try to run this on the server. Now this is happening on the server now, right? This is not happening as static, nothing happening on the static part. This would run on the server that is inside the getStaticProps. It would fire this function for this particular slug or whatever you want to call. You can see in the context, you can see that we have the params property, which is containing the, this particular thing. So you can have context.params.name in our case, and this would be name for us. So you can fetch, make a DB call, whatever it is. And if the result is present, you can return a valid object. Next.js would then use that getStaticProps just like it has before to inject it and show the page. So in this case, it would be call the getStaticProps on server, render the page, and then in background, Next.js would add this to the paths list and would store it locally on the file system for faster access, right? By that, what we mean is the next time you visit this URL right here, what's going to happen is directly send the output from file. Because we have already done all of this and we have stored it on the file system for faster access. Only this particular specific page. If you change another page, if you change it to another page, whole of this thing repeats again, right? So yeah, I mean, that is how getStaticPaths in Next.js work. That is how the paths property work. That's how the fallback works. One last thing, if you have the fallback as true, what's going to happen is that Next.js is not going to wait for this getStaticProps to finish. By that, what I mean is if you're visiting this for the first time, what's going to happen is Next.js is immediately going to serve you this page with the props being empty, right? And it's going to, fill this props object later on. So how would you know that it is waiting for getStaticProps to run on the server? Well, you have to first of all import the router like this. You have to say something like if router dot is fallback, that is, it is loading on the server, you can just return h1 loading, something like this, right? And be done with it. So now if I go ahead and visit a page something like hello fruit1, you can see I get loading for a bunch of seconds for this page URL as well, for a bunch of seconds. And then once the props are injected, the props is available to us, this is fallback property becomes false automatically. Next.js handles that for us, and we render our actual component. Now, when you are on production, the first time you would visit this URL, you're going to see loading and then hello. But the subsequent refreshes, you're going to directly see hello, right? Because Next.js now has the output from the file system itself. So you do not have to wait, or you do not have to see loading again. But in development, you're going to see loading every time, because just like I said, in development, Next.js for development purposes would fire getStaticProps every single time, right? So that means that it would also become true every single time, and you're going to see loading every single time. But don't worry about that. In production, you're just going to see it for the first time, and on the subsequent dynamic builds of this URL, you're just going to see the page directly. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for getStaticPaths. That's all you really need to know about this. That the first thing is it is absolutely necessary when you're using dynamic routes. The second thing is about the fallback property, what false means, what true means. False really restricts your domain of this thing, and true means that anything is allowed, but that would have to go through the getStaticProps. And yeah, I mean, in case of false, Next.js would pre-render all these routes, and you're gonna not get is fallback for the pre-rendered routes, but for anything else, it's going to just send it to the getStaticProps and wait for it. And if it is false, that is the fallback is false, that just means that you are fixed with the number of routes which you have here, and this is fallback would never run anyway for any route, because if it is not present here, then you're gonna get a 404. So yeah, that's basically all you need to know about getStaticPaths, getStaticProps, and dynamic files. There's one more thing which is left, that is the getServerSideProps, which is essentially having your own server call on every route, and is usually said to be, something of a, not really a bad practice, but something which you should avoid if you could avoid. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, what we're going to take a look at is the getServerSideProps. Now there's another function which is known as getServerSideProps. Let me just go back to the dynamic thing, and I'm going to export const getServerSideProps, and getServerSideProps is the type for this. And again, we have the context with us, which you can monitor for more values, right? You can see we have actually interesting things this time with this. But anyway, what we have here is that again we have to return the actual props, right? And you could have pretty much my favorite number again as mat.random. It does not really matter. The thing which matters is that getServerSideProps is going to run always, right? Which is why it is usually just said that if you can go ahead and make your code not use server-side props, that is better. The reason for this is that getServerSideProps is called always on every page request, even on production, right? So just like we saw that Next.js could actually create static bundles out of these files, static HTML pages, that is not going to be possible when you're using getServerSideProps on a single page, right? So if you're using getServerSideProps on this page, Next.js is not going to create a static dynamic.html file on its file system to serve it faster, because you never know what you might return inside the props. That is the whole purpose of getServerSideProps. It adds a layer of dynamic rendering on the React framework. To be honest, this is what we wanted. This is what we always wanted with Next.js, right? That it allows you to render server-side JavaScript dynamically. This is the essence of server-side JavaScript, right? But when we have finally discovered it, I'm discouraging you to use it. Why is that? Because when you use getServerSideProps, you're calling a node server on every request. That means you get no caching benefits. That means your request would be slower to the clients because it has to, go all the way back to your server to be executed. So this is pretty much in cases where you absolutely cannot afford to have even the slightest delay. Like, inside of getStaticProps, we can have a revalidate parameter here, right? Revalidate 1, which is going to have some sort of static data, but within a certain time frame, it's going to update that. But with getServerSideProps, we do not have anything like that. So this is very much useful in case you want to create a real-time dashboard or stuff like that, where latency would be absolutely disaster on page updates or page refreshes, something like that. So yeah, I mean, that is pretty much the whole purpose of getServerSideProps. I would say to almost always never use it unless you absolutely need it, because you lose a lot of static optimization benefits when you use that. So yeah, it exists as a tool, as a thing. If you need it, that is great. But try to avoid this in your application logic. Try to figure out the logic where you can use this, where you can avoid using this. getStaticProps is the best, and you can even use it as a dynamic thing now with the revalidate parameters. So that's awesome. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you pretty soon in the next one.